came up in the San Francisco Bay Area where there was movements going on, civil rights and anti-Vietnam War, the early ecology movement. And I concluded back then, I asked the same question John Lewis asked at the March on Mars in 1963. I asked it in 1964, where is my party? The two parties were dragging on civil rights. And the next year, they both went into Vietnam and escalated that war radically. So I'm saying, where's my party? Without the left, the Democrats move to the right. They accommodate neo-fascism. Clinton called it triangulation. And that's why the whole spectrum has moved to the right. We need a left. The question is, how are you going to vote against Trump? If you're a socialist or a progressive, you give your vote to Biden, you just voted against Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, deep military spending cuts, taking on this new nuclear arms race. You voted for Biden, the neoliberal hawk. You vote for the Greens, everybody understands what that vote means. And the more votes we get, the less likely the left is going to be taken for granted. Whoever gets elected, and they have to deal with us. If you want a left, you gotta give it some support. If you don't, you're not going to have a left. People think it's too marginal, it's not there, so we got to settle for neoliberalism, and that's not what the people need.
At this point, people have been very vocal about the policies that they are most interested in having, Medicare for all being one of those, marijuana decriminalization and legalization being another one. And it just seems to me that for a major political party to be able to, they've heard these demands and are still choosing to ignore them and demanding essentially that because they're not the other guy, we're less bad. Even though we're not going to give you what you want, you still, you should still show up and support us. I think that that's arrogant. I think that certain segments of the population, our vote has been taken for granted way too long. We've been kicking the can down the road. It's always too risky to support what you actually believe in. At some point, you're going to have to pull a pin. You're going to have to jump.
We don't want the left to be taken for granted. I think what you have happen in the Democratic Party is they let progressives make speeches, but the corporate Democrats make the decisions. And to remain a player in the Democratic Party, people like Bernie Sanders make compromises. And I was surprised when he said to Ali Velshi on MSNBC, I'm compromising on Medicare for all. I'll go with Biden, 55 and older and the children, but in between, we're going to have the ACA and a public option to buy into Medicare, which is the public option is more expensive than Medicare. I mean, that was the program of the other Democrats running, and Bernie's adapted to that. And so that undermines, when you want Medicare for all, Bernie's now legitimizing a retreat, and that's a problem. When we run is on our own platform and make the politicians come to us, we get concessions. I'll give you an example. 2014. Andrew Cuomo was first challenged by a guest you're going to have on tonight, Zephyr Teachout, in the primary. She got about 190,000 votes. And then I ran in the general, and we had some of the same demands, like a ban on fracking and a $15 minimum wage. And in that general election, I came up with 5% of the vote. And that was the year Andrew Cuomo wanted to run up the vote, get ready to run for president, get more votes than his father, Mario Cuomo, ever got, get more votes when he was first elected in 2010, and he got less. He couldn't take us for granted. And after that election, he adopted several policies he had never supported before that we had campaigned on. The ban on fracking, a $15 minimum wage, a millionaire's tax, paid family leave. And that's what happens when we stand our ground and make the politicians come to us, particularly when some of these demands have majority support, like Medicare for all. Absolutely. So I think you're better off telling the politicians what you want with your vote than just giving it away, and they're going to do what they want and take you for granted, ignore you. So we do have leverage. We don't have to win the office to change the calculation of the politicians in office.
These conditions are not new to us. And in certain of our communities, this has been our reality for a very, very long time. And so I understand the need to be cautious. But once you elect the less bad, and we have seen this, where is their incentive to do what you want them to do? You've given them your vote. They have their place. And if the policies that you want going in are not in their platform to begin with, where is your leverage to make them all of a sudden adopt those policies? What leverage do you have? Your voice is your vote. When do you stop conceding? And one of the good things for me about being on the left is I'm not beholden to anybody about what I say, what I stand on. You know, it's either, you know, this is our truth. And if you're not with it, then you're not with it. I'm not going to castigate anybody for it, but I'm digging my heels in and I'm not backing down either.
How do we fight the right? You know, we get Trump and, you know, his cronies out of there, but the fascists are still there. They've always been there. These are the Dixiecrats. These are the Goldwater Republicans that mobilized the white backlash. And, you know, when they marched on Washington, John Lewis and them, their analysis, you know, from A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, leaders in the Socialist Party, and the organizers of that march were the Yitzhals, the Young People's Socialist League. And they pulled that together, and their analysis was, we need to win as we move from civil rights to human rights, as they put it, economic human rights for everybody, to undercut this white backlash. And that was the Economic Bill of Rights, to a job, a guaranteed income above poverty, a housing program so everybody was housed and so forth, and getting out of Vietnam and putting that money into what the people need. And the Democrats had a majority in both houses in that period. They had Lyndon Johnson in the presidency, and they didn't pass that Economic Bill of Rights, which Roosevelt had first brought up in his last two State of the Union addresses, 1944 and 1945. And because we didn't win that Economic Bill of Rights back then, the white backlash is now in the White House. And their Democrats, think of Clinton when he brought out his law and order program running for president. He went to Stone Mountain, spiritual home of the Ku Klux Klan, with a bunch of prisoners behind him, mostly black. You know what the message there was? Like you said, the neoliberals are more subtle, but the imagery was real clear. I mean, Donald Trump would have loved that as a photo op. So we can't rely on the Democrats to fight the right. They accommodate them, triangulation and all that. You get behind the lesser evil, it just opens the door to greater evils. We need to stand for what we stand for.
Yeah.